Hello and welcome to the Travel Tips and Trips podcast. In this podcast, I share deep dives into new and exciting travel destinations, provide you with insider travel tips and recommendations from my favorite spots, and share my own personal travel experiences and lessons learned. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the ups and downs of traveling solo, something that I have done many times, and although I am a huge fan of solo travel and feel like it's something that everyone should do at least once in their lives, solo travel does have its fair share of ups and downs, so grab yourself a tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. If one thing is true, it's that so many people dream of traveling the world, but not everyone's dreams are the same. Not everyone wants to go to the same places, not everyone has the same budget to work with, and not everyone wants to travel in the same way, in the same style. And so not everyone who dreams of travel has a friend or travel companion to go exploring with. So what do you do if you really want to travel, but you don't have anyone to go exploring with you? Let's start with the benefits of solo travel because, like I mentioned, I really am an advocate for traveling solo at least once in your life, and I do feel like the benefits far outweigh the negatives, but the most obvious benefit that comes to mind is that when you are traveling solo, you can really just do whatever you want at any time. There's no real compromises to be made or arguments to be had about where you want to visit, what time you want to go there, where to stop and eat along the way. You can create your own itinerary and choose to stick to it or not. And that can be a really amazing feeling. My first truly solo trip wasn't until I was in my mid-20s, but prior to that, I had taken a day or two to myself on group trips and trips with partners. And even in those moments away, I had felt a huge sense of freedom in getting to go at my own pace and just do whatever I wanted, keeping no one else in mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love group travel. I led group travel tours for years, and I love traveling with my partner or close friends. I used to do annual girls' trips, but there really is an extreme sense of freedom that comes with solo travel that you just don't get on any other type of trip. Now, what if you get sick of being alone, though? Maybe you are more in the camp of wanting to travel with other people, but you have no choice but to go solo. Another really interesting thing that I've noticed about solo travel is that it's actually been far easier for me to make friends while I'm on the road when I'm traveling alone versus when I'm traveling with other people. When you're traveling alone, often it's more likely that someone else traveling alone or that other travelers in general are going to say hello or invite you to join them compared to if you're traveling with another person. So that in itself has always been really helpful for me as someone who isn't always comfortable being the first person to say hi or interject myself in a conversation with people that I don't know. There are also ways, though, that you can make making friends more likely throughout the planning process. For example, booking stays at hostels is always going to give you a higher likelihood of making friends. Hostel common areas are usually much more social than hotels, and you can always link up and make plans with your roommates when you first arrive, because introducing yourself when you first get there is going to feel much more comfortable and expected given the situation. But even if you prefer a private room for comfort or safety reasons, so many hostels these days offer private accommodations, and then you can still take advantage of the common areas and any other events that are going on in the hostel at that time. Booking yourself on group tours, walking tours, or food tours is also another great way to make friends while you're traveling solo. And in those cases, you're often likely to make friends with people who have similar interests beyond just travel because they're on the same tour as you. In my years of booking travel for solo travelers and groups of travelers and couples who want to get away onto group trips, I've had so many people email me with concerns about, what if I don't like my roommate, or, how do you choose who's on which group trip together? And ultimately, the most important sort of words of wisdom that I can impart in these cases is that at the very least, Everybody who you're traveling with and everybody who you're going to meet throughout your travels has at least one thing in common with you, which is travel. So at the very least, you have that in common. Booking yourself onto themed tours with yoga classes or cooking courses is just going to amplify the chances of you at least having various things to talk about, but it makes making friends so much easier and takes so much of that stress off compared to trying to make friends and meet new people out in the wild, I'll say. The truth of the matter, though, is that traveling solo isn't always going to be easy. You're not always going to have great luck making friends, or the hostel where you're staying might be slow and quiet at the time of your visit. And so there is always going to be that chance that you might find yourself feeling more alone than you had hoped. And I would say that one of the biggest challenges of traveling solo, especially on long haul trips, is going to be dealing with loneliness. I know for me, there have certainly been times on my solo adventures where I felt really alone and isolated and wished that I had someone to share my experiences with. And there are a lot of ways that you can push through that, going for walks, checking in on cute coffee shops. Honestly, journaling was a really big help for me. But if you can't push through it in those ways, the best thing that you can really do is just remember that the feeling that you're feeling is temporary. Things will likely be different in the next spot or on the next tour or after a new dorm mate arrives, and just try to embrace the benefits of being alone instead of focusing on the negative feelings that you have, which is easier said than done sometimes, I know, but unfortunately that is just the reality. Another reality being safety concerns. So again, overall, I am a huge advocate for solo travel. I have done it many times in many different destinations, but as with anything, there are pros and cons, and safety is another challenge that you need to be aware of when you're planning on traveling solo. And this one more serious than the other, I would say. Now, I have been very lucky, knock on wood, that I have yet to have an emergency traveling solo, but I have had medical emergencies while traveling with my partner that would have been much different had I been by myself. There was one instance, for example, where I was out with my partner and some friends hiking in El Salvador, where I got so dehydrated from this hike that my legs essentially stopped working. I thought that I was prepared for the hike. I woke up that day feeling great. I hadn't been sick. I had hydrated and brought water along with me. The hike ended up being quite a bit longer than I thought that it was going to be, and the heat was just so bad that day. None of us were feeling great, but myself in particular, who has a rough history with dehydration, I just stopped moving, basically. My brain was ready to take me home, but my legs were not going to let that happen. And so a 10-minute uphill back to our truck really turned into more of like a 30 or 40-minute ordeal with my husband on one side of me and another friend on the other, just helping me with every single step. And had I been alone, that experience would have been so much more difficult and could have ended really badly. So when you're traveling solo, you really do need to be even more aware of your surroundings and be even more prepared than you might be traveling otherwise. Which brings me really to my biggest tip for solo travelers in this episode, which is to do your research. Obviously, had I known that that hike was going to be much longer, I would have brought more water and so on. So you need to know where you're going, what to expect when you get there, and what to watch out for. Before arriving in a new city, for example, know what scams you might need to look out for, know if there are any certain neighborhoods that you should be avoiding, and let your friends and family back home know roughly where you plan to be. It's also a good idea, might I add, to trust your instincts. If something does not feel right, it probably isn't. If you're thinking about traveling solo, though, with those extra couple of challenges in mind, I would still say, hands down, just do it, go for it. Traveling solo for me and for so many others has been such a rewarding experience. And honestly, when have you ever regretted doing something new and exciting just for yourself? Exactly. Adventure awaits. That's going to be it for me for this episode of the Tips and Trips podcast, though. So if you enjoyed our little solo travel chat, be sure to subscribe for more episodes, inspiration, and travel tips. And until I chat with you next, stay great, travel safe, and I'll connect with you again in the next episode of the Travel Tips and Trips podcast.